The 1970s gave us some of the biggest rock legends. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Aerosmith, you know them, you love them. But for every band that made it big, there were others just as talented that never got their moment in the spotlight. Some had bad luck, some had bad timing, and some were simply ahead of their time. But one thing's for sure, they rocked just as hard. In this video, we're bringing back 10 incredible 70s rock bands that should have been massive. These are the bands that had killer songs, serious talent, and all the right ingredients, but for some reason, never became household names. So get ready to rediscover some lost rock gems. And if you love deep dives into underrated music, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Big Star had everything. Great songs, catchy melodies, and the kind of sound that should have made them huge. Formed in Memphis in 1971, they mixed British-style pop with Southern rock, creating music that was both energetic and emotional. Their debut album, #1 Record, had songs that felt like instant hits, but hardly anyone heard it because of poor distribution, even though critics loved them. Their next albums, Radio City and Third Sister Lovers, also didn't sell well. Problems with their record label and issues within the band led to an early breakup. They had all the talent, but none of the luck. Years later, bands like Rem and The Replacements called Big Star a huge influence, and their music finally got the love it deserved. But back in the 70s, they were just another band that got lost in the shuffle. The Runaways had everything: attitude, talent, and a sound that was pure rock and roll. Formed in 1975, they were one of the first all-female rock bands, breaking barriers in a male-dominated industry. With Joan Jett, Lita Ford, and Sherry Curry in the lineup, they had the potential to be massive. Their songs, like Cherry Bomb, were raw, rebellious, and full of energy. But despite their talent, they struggled in the US. Critics didn't take them seriously, and their management was a mess. However, in Japan, they were treated like rock gods, selling out stadiums and topping charts. Internal conflicts and industry pressure led to their breakup in 1979. Joan Jett and Lita Ford went on to have successful solo careers, but the Runaways never got the recognition they truly deserved. They should have been legends, not just pioneers.
It's a song called Noise Addiction. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Pure Hell was one of the first all-black punk bands, and they brought serious energy. Formed in Philadelphia in 1974, they had the raw power of the Sex Pistols and the speed of the Ramones. Their music was loud, aggressive, and way ahead of its time. In 1978, they released Noise Addiction, a song that proved they could go toe-to-toe with any punk band out there. But the music industry didn't know what to do with them. Labels ignored them, and they never got the big break they needed. While other punk bands became legends, Pure Hell disappeared into the background. But today, people are finally realizing how important they were. They weren't just another punk band. They were pioneers. Ace of Cups should have been huge. Formed in San Francisco in the late 60s, they were one of the first all-female rock bands. They played alongside legends like Jimi Hendrix and the Grateful Dead, proving they could hold their own in the psychedelic rock scene. Their music was a mix of blues, folk, and rock, with powerful harmonies and great songwriting. Hendrix himself even called them one of his favorite bands. But despite all that talent, they never got a record deal when it mattered. The music industry wasn't ready for an all-female rock band, and by the early 70s, they faded away. Decades later, they finally released their debut album. But by then, their moment had passed. They should have been pioneers, not just a forgotten name in rock history. Yesterday's Children started as a garage band in Connecticut, but by 1970, they had a much heavier sound. Their only album was a mix of bluesy hard rock and early heavy metal, kind of like a mix between Cream and Black Sabbath. It was loud, raw, and full of killer riffs. They had everything needed to break through, but with no real promotion and no big record label behind them, their album went mostly unnoticed. After just one record, the band faded away. Years later, rock fans rediscovered their music, and their album became a cult classic. They had the sound of a band that could have been huge, but they never got the chance to prove it. Backstage Pass was one of the first female-led punk bands in Los Angeles. They started in the mid-70s, playing in the same scene as the Runaways and the Go-Go's. Their music was fast, fun, and full of attitude, mixing punk energy with catchy melodies. They played all the right clubs and had the talent to make it big, but they never got a proper record deal. While other bands from the scene took off, Backstage Pass got left behind. Even though they never became famous, they were part of the early LA punk movement and helped shape the scene. If things had gone differently, they could have been one of the greats of Wondrous Legends, or AOL, was a Chicago band that mixed folk, rock, and psychedelic sounds. They formed in the late 60s and had a dreamy, mystical style, kind of like the Moody Blues. Their songs told stories and had a unique, almost magical feel. In 1971, they recorded an album, but it was never released. Without a record to get their music out there, the band faded away, and most people never even got the chance to hear them. Years later, their lost album was finally released, and people realized how special they were. If things had gone differently, AOL could have been a big name in folk rock. Instead, they became one of music's best-kept secrets. The Punks started in Michigan in 1973, before punk rock was even a thing. Their music was loud, fast, and full of energy, kind of like a mix between the Stooges and the punk bands that came later. They weren't just playing punk, they were helping to create it. But while bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols became famous, the Punks never got their big break. They recorded some great songs, but without a record deal or the right connections, they stayed underground. Years later, punk fans rediscovered their music, and people finally started giving them credit as early pioneers of the genre. If things had gone differently, they could have been one of the biggest punk bands of the 70s. Shocking Blue was a Dutch rock band with a unique sound and a powerful lead singer, Mariska Veres. In 1969, they hit it big with Venus, a song that went to #1 around the world. It seemed like they were on their way to becoming huge, but after Venus, they struggled to keep the success going. They released plenty of great songs, but none of them became big hits. By the mid-70s, the band faded away, and most people only remember them for that one song. The truth is, Shocking Blue was much more than a one-hit wonder. Their mix of rock, pop, and psychedelia was ahead of its time. If things had gone differently, they could have been one of the biggest bands of the 70s. The Suite had everything a rock band needed: big riffs, catchy songs, and a flashy glam rock style. Formed in the UK, they had a string of hits in the early 70s, like Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run. In Europe, they were huge, but in the US, they never quite reached the same level. Even though their music was full of energy and perfect for radio, they struggled with image problems. Some people saw them as too bubblegum, while others thought they weren't serious enough. By the late 70s, glam rock was fading, and the Suite got left behind. Looking back, their influence is clear. Many rock and metal bands took inspiration from them, and their songs still hold up today. They should have been way bigger in the US than they were. The 1970s was a time of legendary rock bands. But as we've seen, not every great band got the fame they deserved. Whether it was bad luck, bad timing, or the industry not knowing what to do with them, these bands missed out on the spotlight. Even though their music was just as good as the biggest names of the era. The good news? It's never too late to discover them. Their songs are still out there, waiting to be heard. So if any of these bands caught your interest, go give them a listen. You might just find your new favorite. If you enjoyed this video and love discovering underrated music, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. There are so many lost rock gems out there, and we're just getting started.